if one were to say, oh, I don't know, collect Fantastic Four action figures, completing the team is pretty easy, right? I mean, Fantastic Four, there's 4 members, you know exactly who to get. Well, okay, maybe it does get a little confusing when you're trying to figure out which error. Well, oh, all right, this is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it? Okay, let's start over. Let's say you're collecting the Avengers. Well, clearly you know who to get because, well, you flip to Avengers #1 and you see, lifelong members, the Hulk, who's been in every, okay, well, yeah, the Avengers aren't exactly the best example of this either. What if we just get the movie Avengers? Because that's a core team and easy to define, right? We can wrap our arms around that. Cap, Thor, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and okay, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. This is the problem. Well, okay, maybe it's not a problem, but it's an opportunity with action figures. You see, they're really awesome, and they keep coming out with more and more, and finding ways to say no and create limits so you're not spending your entire life savings on these things. It's part of the fun, joy, and challenge of being an adult action figure collector, and a lot of us do this by creating rules about what we collect and what we don't. As an example, since we're talking about Marvel Legends, I, in particular, collect 1992-ish X-Men characters, and I also like to collect Spider-Man classic villains, and I'm sure I've got a Spider-Man or two to fight them. This just doesn't live on that shelf. He's over on a different shelf. All right, and Fantastic Four, I like to get the core team, but not really, like their entire Rogues Gallery, and I love having the original 60s and then the 90s versions, because those are the two that I'm most familiar with. And that's pretty much my bucket of Marvel Legends. While occasionally I'll get one-off characters that might mean something to me from my childhood, and I love collecting characters that sort of progress, meaning, a character that came out 10, 20 years ago and then a modern version, and, comparing the differences. It's a lot of fun. And then finally, I have my kind of box of every day. These are duplicates I buy, so I don't have to disturb my displays. So if there's a character I particularly really like, well, at least I used to, when they were $20, I'd buy a double. And this way I could have kind of a non-mint version that, gets played with when kids come over, that I can give them some toys to play with, or, I can just grab if I feel like I need, a Dr. Octopus, or who else is on top? Leela.
On one of my frequent trips to the ground,
I noticed something interesting. I have an Avengers collection. Now, I do like the Avengers, especially the movies, but I definitely did not grow up reading Avengers comics. Avengers were kind of like, the nerdy part of nerds back in 92. The X-Men were the cool nerds. So for someone who doesn't collect Avengers figures, how in the world did this happen? How did I wind up with the entire team? Well, I think this is an interesting look at childhood and toy collecting. So aside from the X-Men and Spider-Man villains, I also long-term am collecting Infinity Gauntlet, Marvel Legends, and I mean the original comic book, because this was one of my first big Marvel comics when I was 12, 13 that my parents sent me at summer camp, and it introduced me to the whole Marvel universe. So in order to get this, I can pass, for example, on classic Vision here, as cool as it is. This is not, quote-unquote, my Vision. This is the version that was in Infinity Gauntlet, so I bought it. I don't have room right now to display my Infinity Gauntlet figures, nor is there a complete collection, which is why I don't have an image of it. But slowly over time, I've been building this, like this Scarlet Witch figure I first bought from Toy Biz, and then updated when a Hasbro version came out. Scarlet Witch, on one hand, though, does double because she's also kind of an X-Men-ish character. I mean, she is Magneto's daughter, sort of, depending on the retcon, and, Pedro's sister, again, depending on the story. So she kind of fits in with that, too, which is why I picked up a second Scarlet Witch. So I had the original Toy Biz one for my Infinity Gauntlet shelf, and then this one could go with my X-Men. And it's interesting because later on, a Scarlet Witch specifically for the X-Men came out, and I actually passed on this one. Well, okay, I did buy the set because I needed that Magneto and I needed that Quicksilver for my X-Men 92 collection. But the Scarlet Witch figure, looking at it side by side with the one I already had that was released for Avengers, I prefer that one. It's also the one that's from Infinity Gauntlet, where she doesn't have the purple on top. It's just skin on the shoulders, if you will, and the neckline. So yeah, eBay, easy to pass off what you don't need. It's not scalping, right? When you're just selling off things you already bought and don't need. I think that's just like, especially when you're selling them at a loss and you're not making money off of it. Anyway, that's not important right now. So so yes, and I was also able to pass on this one because while it's a more Avengery-y redeco, I didn't need it. Now, Captain America, on the other hand, I did have some childhood memories of when it came to this version of Cap, which was Capwolf. Oddly, this was one of the first sort of story. Well, one of the first Cap stories I think I ever read. I don't know how it wound up in front of me, but I definitely had fond memories, vivid memories of reading this particular run, the original version of. I mean, he's been a wolf a few times, and it's definitely clear why this version gets made into toys so much because it's darn cuddly and cute. And anytime you can take a major superhero and give them in a sort of transformed monster mode that also is kind of a little cute, hey, you're like writing your own recipe for toy sales right there. So yeah, I was excited then when Cap Wolf came out in this wave, which was tied to the second Captain America movie. And this actually demonstrates perfectly what Marvel Legends has done so well in distribution, because they've tied their waves to movie product statements, not their own individual Marvel Legends statement. And that's also allowed them to get out characters that are thematically surrounding the character in a movie. So Captain America wave, you also get some other comic book Captain America villains. So allies, if you will. So this is why Marvel Legends was able to stay at retail as long as they did, because shrewdly they were able to connect the SKU to the movie product statement, not a generic collector or comic book style statement. So, hey, you wind up with Cap Allies and Cap Wolf because the movie came out. Unfortunately, Cap Wolf was one of 4 figures I lost in the cross-country move, along with 2 of my multiple men and my Raft Spider-Man, which I was really bitter about. I had to rebuy that one for like $80. So I wound up getting the 80th anniversary Cap. I like the lighter colors. I actually wish I still had my original Cap Wolf figure. I have the head. I have the wolf head. It's still here. There is, of course, the 20th anniversary one, which I do like the lighter colors, but I kind of feel like I already have an iconic Cap. And since Cap's not really my number one guy, and I have an Infinity Gauntlet version with the 80th anniversary, I'm great with that. So, yay, Cap. Thor. Now, Thor, on the other hand, I had this one comic when I was 13 that came in a pack sent to me at summer camp. But I also had read the Thor Frog comic book when I was a kid. It was in the basement of my grandfather's house, along with a whole other stack of comics that he slowly would send me at camp. But that one in particular, I read staying over his house one summer. So I just kind of thought Thor was a silly character. I only read this frog story, so I passed on the original Toy Biz version. But as I grew in my nerdhood and learned who Thor really was, I realized, he's actually pretty darn cool. And after Ragnarok, I was like, oh man, Thor kicks ass. This is awesome. I'm now a Thor fan. So I think because of Ragnarok, I bought this 80th anniversary Thor figure because I was just darn impressed. And the movie had turned me into a Thor fan. Previously, I just was like, he's like, this, barbarian, He-Man, Norse god type character. And, well, what really suckered it in for me, though, was the fact that I had this Belrog NECA figure, and I knew after watching that fight in Ragnarok, I'm like, ooh, I'm going to get Thor and put him on top of this guy, and it's going to look awesome. So that's why I bought Thor, so I could put him on top of a NECA Belrog figure. There you go. There's, childhood right there. Okay, Iron Man. Obviously, more variants of Iron Man than any other Avenger out there because, well, he changes his armor like most people change their shoelaces. For me, though, the quintessential Iron Man is the Centurion armor, the Silver Centurion armor version, which oddly I passed on the Toy Biz one just because I was young and I wasn't collecting Marvel Legends. But when the Walgreens current Hasbro Silver Centurion, I scooped him up super quick. This was my very first comic ever that was given to me to own. This came from that same stash in my grandfather's basement that the Thor Frog issue came from, but this was one that he actually sent me at summer camp. Previous summer I'd spent at his house digging through them, so he knew I kind of liked them. I was able to pass on that 80th one because, again, my Iron Man is Silver Centurion Iron Man. That's the one that I was first exposed to as a child, so I had no desire for another one. This one did it for me. In fact, I bought 3 of them. That's how much I like this version of Iron Man, because I have so many memories of sitting in that bunk. It was Cabin Ezra. I remember at Camp Hess Kramer on that top hill, sitting there and unfolding that comic book. And it also made up for, again, missing out on what was the previous sort of definitive version of this Iron Man, which was released by Toy Biz years earlier. So I was able to make up for that, and I was most happy, because there's nothing like toy regrets. Of course, as a second Iron Man, I needed this version, the Epic Heroes one, because it's the one from Infinity Gauntlet. This is the version from the 90s with the giant boot rockets. And it's only been released once ever as a toy, which was this one. I missed it when it came out, and I had to scoop it up on eBay a couple years later, which I wasn't too ecstatic about. But I'm glad, because this is the one I want and need for my Infinity Gauntlet display. With one day, I will find room to have a shelf for that. So just right now, not so much. When this figure was re-released in the retro wave, you'll notice they retooled the legs to remove those giant boots. So no need for the upgrade, because to me this was a downgrade. It was no longer the 90s Infinity Gauntlet one. There's another Iron Man in my collection, though, and I promise I'm wrapping up the Iron Man section, and that's this one. So why in the world would I buy an AI version that's not from Infinity Gauntlet and not from my childhood? Well, it was $4. It was on like super ridiculous clearance. I was like, $4? I can't pass up on that. I mean, I could use this just for the blasts and maybe sell off the leg for $4 and break even. But I absolutely fell in love with this. Once I popped off that clear head and popped on the helmet, this just became a fun everyday Iron Man. I love the colors. I love how it's yellow and red. It's not gold. There's no shine. It's just flat colors and so toy. This is the most fun Iron Man I've ever had. And so he's a good example. This is a figure that's in that bin of everyday figures, not part of a collection. An easy pass on the 20th anniversary one because, like I said, I already have my Silver Centurion Iron Man, my Infinity Gauntlet Iron Man, and now my token sort of retro classic-y one. No need to get another one. I'm totally satisfied. Black Widow, another one that I got because on super sale. I think this one was closer to probably $7.99, $8.99 on sale. And while all Black Widow figures tend to be similar, so it's not like there's that much of an upgrade, this is the Infinity Gauntlet one when she appeared in a few panels. She's not part of the main hero attack, but she is a sort of background hero that gets, I think, like one page in issue 2. So, interesting figure to wind up with. Bought it because, hey, you can't say no to a $7 Natasha. And it's the same head as Mary Jane, so I kind of thought, well, I could always pop it off and maybe find another body to put this with my Spider-Man figures, but still haven't been able to do that. But I've kept her as Natasha, as Black Widow. She's also in that bin of everyday figures, not part of a regular collection, but much like that Iron Man, I mean, you just can't say no to a really inexpensive, well-done figure. And there's other Mary Janes coming out, so, my original intent was like, ooh, $7, I can turn her into Mary Jane. It's just turned into, hey, now I own a Black Widow figure, and eventually I'll get that adult Mary Jane. Wrapping it up, I did a video not too far back on Hulk. So this is an interesting one because Hulk is the only figure in this quote-unquote Avengers collection that I deliberately bought. I'd had Hulks come and go through my hands over the years, but always for the Build-A-Figure pieces. I wasn't buying Hulk because I wanted a Hulk figure. I just wanted either the Galactus piece or the Fin Fang Foom piece or et cetera, et cetera. In fact, this one I think I customized into a Savage Dragon Brainiac character. Fin Fang Foom, though, is still on my shelf, and, glad to have had it, and glad I was able to sell off all those unwanted Hulks and Doc Samsons. Not to impugn anyone who loves Doc Samson. And I've even recently made a deal to acquire this 80th anniversary Hulk, which I like the head a lot better. I'm hoping the head looks good on the 20th body with the extra paint ops that the pants got. I really like that. So I'm going to kind of see if I can do a little bit of a kit bash. But hey, if it doesn't, I now have a Hulk. And that's interesting because I never had a desire to have a Hulk. I just realized I don't own a Hulk toy. I should buy one. There were no Hulk toys in the 80s. There was only this Mego toy from the 70s. Hulk never made it into the Secret Wars line because he needed a unique body type. So, yeah, growing up in the 80s, never had a Hulk, never created an emotional connection to him, but as an adult, just kind of came to the realization that I needed a Hulk. And this was the latest one available. So this one became it. And I'm glad I locked in because with the prices going up, hey, now I can also tell Loki that I have a Hulk. So obviously, if I'm going for an Avengers collection, there's still quite a few figures missing. I don't own a Hawkeye. I think I have one Black Panther figure from the movie, but I definitely don't own a comic book version of Black Panther. So don't have the Avengers, but that goes back to the original point that the team is ever expanding. There's so many characters. If I was all in on the Avengers, it would be a lot like my X-Men shelf. I just think it's so fascinating for someone who, as a child, didn't collect the Avengers, been exposed to the movies, has realized he's obligated to own a Hulk, but all the other figures. very different reasons for buying. Yet at the end of the day, while I deliberately buy X-Men figures, especially if they're from the sort of early '90s look, I never intended to create an Avengers collection, and it just sort of happened organically over time. I guess it just shows you how cool toys are and how much they're connected to our childhoods, our needs, our desires, and hey, even what's going on in pop culture. Because well, the cooler properties get, the more we tend to like them, and suddenly we realize we own them. Have you ever had an experience like this where you didn't collect something but looked around and suddenly said, wait a minute, I have a collection of that? Crazy, right? Share your story on the comments below. Love to hear about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.